What if I told you that expanding at the start is one of the worst things you can do when playing as the Arg Ordstun dwarves in Anbennar, the mod for EU4? That the faction most players choose is actually a trap, and that the correct strategy is to stay in your hold and build up. Only then, by completing the dwarven missions, can you forge a mighty dwarven kingdom in less than 100 years. And I'll show you exactly how to achieve all of this in just a few very simple steps, highlighting the traps you need to avoid along the way. Greetings Imperialists, Lucas here. In Anbennar, there are two ways to play as the dwarves. You can either choose one of the existing dwarven holds that have fallen into stagnation, or, as you saw not long ago, play as a dwarven expedition, whose goal is usually to settle the ruins of an ancient dwarven hold, of which there are plenty throughout the Serpent Spine Mountains. But as you already know, this time I chose the path of a dwarven hold, Arg Ordstun. Yes, this is what your map looks like at the start. In short, you can't see anything. That's because the dwarven hold spent centuries in complete isolation, which ultimately led to the stagnation of the entire race. And my goal over the coming years will be to pull them out of this crisis. A crisis that technically hasn't started yet, but it will begin with the very first monthly tick. Arg Ordstun is also the name of my hold. Yes, surprise! A dwarven hold is essentially a city-state that grants incredible bonuses to developing this specific province. And ideally it should be inhabited by one of the subterranean races, dwarves, goblins or kobolds. Every other race suffers significant penalties here. Holds also have a unique mechanic that allows you to dig deeper. In short, digging deeper reduces the cost of developing the province, while also providing increasingly powerful bonuses. The only downside is that it's an extremely long process. Unfortunately, this nation's mission tree isn't very large, but spoiler alert, it'll become 3 times longer, because reaching the final mission unlocks an entirely new chapter of the tree. In Anbennar, playing as the dwarves comes with its own consequences. For example, when it comes to the military, my race loves cannons. Big cannons. The bigger the cannon, the happier they are, and they're not exactly fans of cavalry. And I'm sure you like low prices and huge discounts, especially on games, so it's worth checking out ENEBA, the sponsor of this channel. Lucas recommends it. To activate the discounts, make sure to use the links in the description. Back to the video, I also have a dwarven administration, which comes with both strengths and weaknesses. My government form is Dwarven Clans, which provides some modest bonuses, at least for now, and I also start the game with 2 national modifiers. Opposition gives me small military bonuses, but greatly increases unrest among my social classes. Then there's the national aspiration to restore the Dwarven Empire, which grants me an additional colonist but dramatically increases native uprisings. So peaceful colonization is completely out of the question. However, what I'll be doing over the next several years is completing the missions in this tree. By progressing through them one by one, I'll lead the dwarven race back to prosperity, or collapse trying, because I've already had to restart this campaign once. This particular hold follows the ancient dwarven faith. It's somewhat similar to the dwarven religion from Warhammer. They place more faith in their heroic ancestors than in actual gods. Although heretical branches of the religion also exist in this world, the religion is based on a system you're probably familiar with, holy sites. Controlling them allows your religion to unlock additional bonuses. These are the bonuses I can choose from, and I think reducing development cost will help me the most at the start. Maybe colonization after that, we'll see. Now, on to the estates. There are quite a few more of them. The first 3 are already familiar to you, the usual clergy, nobility and the burghers. Then we have the adventurers and the mages. The adventurers mainly provide bonuses related to mercenaries, while the mages, well, they do quite a lot of things. With this nation, you also have to be extremely careful when granting estate privileges. That's directly tied to these 3 missions, especially the first one. To receive the additional estate bonuses from this mission, I can't have more than the initial starting privilege granted. And I also have to keep a very close eye on the influence of practically every estate. So I'll only grant the bare minimum of privileges. First, I'll give supremacy to the nobility, since it increases both loyalty and equilibrium for all estates. Then I'll grant the monarch point privileges to the clergy and the nobility. I won't be taking the burgher one. Now I sell crown land, which gives me some much needed capital, because while the game is paused, I recruit an army using all of my available manpower. Those of you who watch my videos already know this trick. It's all about manipulating the estate agenda to increase the odds of getting a cheaper advisor, which worked this time as well. The requirement for completing this agenda is having more than 50% manpower. I achieved that by simply cancelling the army recruitment, which immediately refunds both my money and manpower. Then I wait one day, which completes the agenda successfully, and immediately hire the discounted advisor. And while I'm here, I also switch my national focus to military points. On top of that, I recruit the noob company. That's all the initial setup done. Now it's time to complete my very first mission, which marks the beginning of my hold's recovery from centuries of stagnation. I'll wait until the first monthly tick before doing that, because that's when the event that begins our recovery from stagnation fires, and yes, I won't be reading the lore to you. If you want to just pause the video and read everything yourself. But in short, I'm informed that my hold is actually caught in a conflict between 4 factions. 3 of them are positive factions, the Reclaimers, who are focused on restoring the former glory of the ancient dwarven holds, the Expansionists, a faction dedicated to colonizing the surrounding lands as quickly as possible, and the Diamond Guard, a militaristic faction that believes a strong army is the foundation of everything. The 4th faction, the negative one, is the Beholden. These are the hardline dwarves who want the hold to remain isolated. What begins is essentially a debate, along with a series of events that will gradually push us toward one of those first 3 positive paths. The 4th one can't be chosen. However, many players, myself included when I first started, make the mistake of immediately choosing one of those 3 factions. At first I'll focus on the Reclaimers, but what we actually want is to complete this national event, in a way that prepares all 3 factions for reform. Why? You'll see. I think it's absolutely worth it. We also have a second option for preparing a faction. As you can see, it's unfortunately quite expensive. But you'll also notice that preparing one faction doesn't negatively affect the preparation of the others. It does, however, annoy the hardliners. So now I'll gradually improve all 3 factions one by one. This modifier tells you when you're allowed to repeat the action. On top of that, I have to cut every possible expense. I even disband one regiment just to stay within my force limit. Now I seize Crown Land, which angers every estate, and only then do I complete this mission. If you completed the mission earlier, you'd unfortunately lose 30 points of each monarch point type. This way, you only make the hardliners angry, and they'll be angry forever anyway. Besides, I'm already upsetting every estate regardless. Now I have a few years ahead of me spent simply waiting and stockpiling monarch points. Literally speed 5 and off we go. After a while, I increase my stability, but only to +1. Because I want prosperity to start growing. Those bonuses are always nice to have. Meanwhile, the debate continues, so more events keep firing. It's basically a debate straight out of the Serbian parliament. So unfortunately, I have to start paying my army again, recruit a general, and only then continue the discussion. Because the arguments here are settled by force. At least we've already managed to sketch out some plans. Fortunately, not every event requires such bloody persuasion. Sometimes though, you'll get this incredibly powerful event, because it lets you slaughter a few hardliners, which oddly enough makes them more supportive of the coming reforms. The alternative choices come with huge penalties that you definitely don't want. And honestly, it's much easier to defeat an enemy army of 6 to 12,000 men. Overall, I try to increase support for all the factions fairly evenly, but it doesn't really matter that much. Once a faction reaches the required preparation level, it simply stops appearing in future events. By 1450, I reach another point that's an absolute trap, because I checked I can already embrace the Renaissance. Normally, this is where I'd activate the cheaper development edict, expand the infrastructure. I'd probably also hire a development cost advisor, although I don't actually remember if one exists in this mod. With every possible development bonus stacked, I'd start developing my hold. But that would be a massive mistake, because spending all those monarch points would only be worthwhile until around 40 development. So take a deep breath and be patient. The only thing that might convince me to develop my hold sooner would be taking out loans. But for now, money isn't a problem. Less than half a year later, I finished preparing another faction. And after just a few more months, I finished the last one, assuming I win this battle. Perfect, everyone is ready. I even managed to satisfy the hardliners. I have to admit I got really lucky with the purge events. There should honestly be an achievement for that. So now it's time to awaken the survivors. A little bit of lore, not much, and then 3 different paths to choose from. The difference is that when all 3 factions have been fully prepared, you also receive the additional bonuses shown at the bottom. Otherwise, you'd only be able to choose one of these options, without any of the extra bonuses. I think waiting less than 2 additional years to complete the entire event is more than worth it. The incredibly powerful and probably the most popular choice is the path of a rapid expansion. It would allow me to colonize this entire region extremely quickly. The military path, on the other hand, seems rather weak at the moment, simply because I don't really have anyone worth conquering yet. For me, the strongest option is the first path, because it lets me develop my hold. Right now it's sitting at a pathetic 18 development, and increasing it by just 1 point costs a whopping 36 monarch points. That's because my hold is only at tier 2 dig at the moment. and I'd normally have to spend hundreds of monarch points to develop it all the way to 50 development. Only then could I deepen it to tier 3. But now I get all of that development practically for free thanks to a massive minus 150% development cost modifier, along with plenty of other useful bonuses. So it's finally time to develop the hold. 5 monarch points per development. Wow, even so I still expand the infrastructure and activate the appropriate edict. So now that my hold has finally emerged from stagnation, the next stage begins, developing the hold while also colonizing the tunnels and mines. For now, my dwarven economy is absolutely terrible, and without the passive bonus that's already being applied, I'd be running a pretty significant deficit. But I'm going to fix that by massively developing my hold, mainly using diplomatic points, because that's what generates the most income. After all, my hold produces gems, and later on it will also produce coal. The income from those resources increases whenever you develop the province using diplomatic points. Especially since if I manage to complete the cutting edge mission, before the Age of Monsters ends, the price of gems will remain at its current level. Otherwise, it'll drop to 3. So first I maximize development with diplomatic points, then military points because I still need a strong army, and every 15 development I'll also expand the infrastructure. They're only small bonuses, but every little bit helps. That's how I reach 40 development while also embracing the Renaissance. Now that I've developed my hold, I can complete the mission where I revoke the first Queen's decree. The decree basically prohibited any dwarf from leaving the hold. Opening ourselves to the outside world also means opening ourselves to trauma and the social unrest that comes with it. But most importantly, I gain an additional colonist along with increased settler growth. That means I now have 2 colonists in total, because the crisis has finally ended as well. Attachment to old traditions and outdated solutions is represented by this new mechanic called roughness, and the higher it is, the harsher the penalties become. My goal is to reduce it through these actions, although the events along the way are going to be painful. I lost 50 reform progress and received a terrible government reform in return. Fortunately, I'll be replacing it through later missions anyway. For now, I continue developing my hold. 250 development. I won't go any higher because it simply becomes too expensive. I embrace the Renaissance institution and continue reclaiming crown land to weaken the estates, although I'll still complete some of their agendas when it's worthwhile. One privilege I can definitely afford to take is cheaper loans, because it automatically disappears once the loans are repaid. And thanks to those cheaper loans, I can refinance the older high-interest ones. I think 1% interest is better than 4%, although apparently some people disagree. I also begin my first parliamentary debate, and unfortunately the early debates are all negative. Over time, through various events, you'll be able to replace them with the normal positive debates. For now, I'll most likely choose the debate that reduces my trade efficiency, because trade is currently my smallest source of income. I also begin colonization by choosing my colonization policy. Considering all those penalties, what I need most is simply the fastest possible colonization speed. I'll start colonizing as soon as my army finishes reorganizing. For now, I only send a colonist to my own hold, because there's always a small percentage chance of increasing its development. Just a tiny one. Wow, I actually managed to introduce fasting. I definitely wasn't expecting that, but it gives me an incredible bonus. With this kind of income, I can finally afford advisors. I can also start investing in magic, and one school is especially useful for me, specifically the School of Divination, which immediately gives me ways to generate additional monarch points, and dwarves need a lot of those. The very next spell also lets me increase income from mineral resources, and gems fall into that category. The entire magic system has been completely reworked, so I won't go into too much detail here. But I have to admit there are a lot of positive changes, and there's plenty to do. One thing I especially like is that now an estate can also study a school of magic. Previously, only the ruler and the heir could. A little later, I have paid off all my loans, caught up on 2 technologies, and after expanding my army, I can finally begin colonizing. Whenever I colonize, I have to keep an army stationed in the province, because there are more than 5,000 natives living there, so native uprisings are inevitable. Right now I'm focusing on colonizing along the roads so I can reach this hold as quickly as possible, and then this one. For now, I'm ignoring the cave provinces, because they're simply too dangerous. At this stage, the best way to spend my money is upgrading my advisors, at least the ones that cost half as much. That'll allow me to push ahead in technology before long and start constructing my first buildings. In provinces with a small native population that I'm colonizing, I'll carry out purges. That way I can move my army elsewhere, for example, to begin a second colony. Unfortunately, there are simply too many natives there to wipe them all out at once, at least for now. Purging natives is expensive and it's just not worth spending even more money on it. Oh, and since I've started colonizing, I also need to grant the adventurers the privilege that speeds up colonization. After a few years, I can finally choose my first idea group for my dwarves, and honestly, I'm about to break the holiest rule in the game: never pick an administrative idea group first. Unless it's innovative ideas, which is exactly what I'm choosing, because they'll provide the greatest long-term benefits and save me a huge amount of monarch points throughout the campaign. Later on, I'll pair them with quality ideas, giving me much stronger infantry as well as better light artillery. And the policy will further strengthen my infantry. Meanwhile, I'm using magic to generate additional monarch points. Those extra 20 points really do make a noticeable difference. I quickly rushed innovative ideas to the third idea because it reduces the cost of every technology. That allowed me to pick up diplomatic and military tech very cheaply, and now I'm quickly catching up in administrative technology because I need that building. Eventually my colonization reaches the marble gates. Time to reclaim this hold for ourselves. The goblins weren't much of a challenge. Or are those actually orcs? Their army is crushed and the hold is captured. I thought I'd be able to drive that goblin tribe away somehow, but no, I actually have to conquer them, which means there's still quite a bit of work ahead before this hold is fully restored. Right afterward, I colonized the last western tunnels, allowing me to complete this mission. And here's a bit of lore. In short, my dwarves have become afraid of the darkness after spending so long in isolation. But thanks to this mission, I finally revealed the surrounding lands. I'm not even going to try pronouncing the name of this hole, but it does have a pretty impressive bridge. Wow, those bonuses. Meanwhile, the marble gate in the second hold grants me a lot of defensive bonuses. And from what I can tell, the hold has been occupied by a dwarven adventure company. That's bad. For them, because my mission tree requires me to conquer it. The battle for the hold basically turned into a race to see who could finish the siege first. And it took me 2 full years. Yep, I won the race by wiping out every last one of my opponents. I'll also take over the colonization of this region from those dwarves, so I can handle it myself. And I'll end the war by fully conquering them. Unfortunately, this hold also has to be restored. I have no idea what those dwarves were doing here. These 2 new holds are absolutely crucial because, as you can see, they finally give me a way out of the Serpent Spine. And since they're the entrances to the outside world, they're also home to fortresses. That will defend access to my tunnels. Now I begin colonizing toward the 4th hold. This time I can also afford to purge the tunnels themselves, especially after noticing that in Anbennar the native population actually reduces goods produced, instead of increasing it like in the base version of EU4. In my second hold, I also convert the religion because it was following orcish shamanism. Meanwhile, I declare war on the nearby goblin tribe simply to humiliate them. Good thing I don't have to worry about supply in this game. This time I only humiliate the tribe and take a huge amount of money from them. In the future though, I can use show strength instead and receive 100 monarch points of each type. I complete another mission, a forlorn sight. A bit more lore tells us that these 3 holds once formed a mighty dwarven trade hub. Now by completing the remaining missions, I'll have to restore that former glory. First however, I need to rebuild the newly conquered holds. In the meantime, I've unlocked another idea group slot, and just as I said earlier, I'm taking quality ideas. I attack another neighboring tribe to secure more money. These ones don't even have an army, but my warriors need to stay battle hardened. The first hold is restored and shortly afterward, so is the second. However, the marble gates will have to wait before I develop them because the province still has the wrong culture. Orcish! I can't change it immediately either, I have to wait for separatism to expire. But I'm in no rush, because in the meantime I still have to colonize the last eastern tunnel, along with the caves surrounding my main hold. Wow, I've discovered the world! And I'm so tiny. Still, at least I'm making pretty decent money for the time being. I use my enormous stockpile of gold to expand the great mines in my capital. After discovering the world, I improve relations with the surrounding nations, allowing me to complete another mission. It gives a small but welcome boost to both of my holds. Along the way, I also learned that our ancient rivals, the dwarves from that hold, are unfortunately still alive. But unfortunately, time is running out, and I still have to complete this entire chain of missions to reach the one that preserves the price of my gems. What's even worse is that I think I was mistaken, it isn't this mission after all, but the one immediately after it. It literally says so right here. That's even worse. I need a total of 8 provinces producing gems. At the moment, I only have 2. But I also know that this mission will give me 3 more. That brings me to 5 in total, so I still need at least 3 additional ones. So my highest priority right now is to colonize as much land as possible, as quickly as possible. That's why I take advantage of having another colonist available, split my army, and then the game immediately informs me that none of that's happening, because it's time for a massive rebellion in my capital. At least I'll get faster colonization out of it, and more importantly, one of my parliamentary debates will now become positive. So once again, I gather my entire army in the capital and crush the rebels. But getting back to colonization, I now have to colonize 4 provinces simultaneously. That's extremely expensive for my budget. Fortunately, I noticed something. I actually have 2 gold provinces, both of which I've already developed to 10 development. I'm also a little tempted to attack and rush forward in order to seize the next 2 holds, especially since Ovdal would give me a pretty nice bonus to my colonists. But it's only a temptation. Fortunately, I resisted, and 10 years later I've achieved my goal, 8 gem producing provinces in total. Even better, I can now push my mission tree forward significantly, especially by improving relations with the Gem Cutters Guild. Well then, I can finally grant all the estate privileges. And the penalties they used to give me have now turned into bonuses. That's much better. Now I build production buildings in every single gem cave. Oh, and it turns out I have a problem. I have to wait before completing that mission until my hold finishes upgrading. So I decide to take further diplomatic action and send an ultimatum to my neighbors, the pink dwarves. They refuse, which gives me a casus belli to make them my vassals, just like I did with the goblin territory. Yeah, goblins aren't a problem. Or maybe kobolds, I honestly don't know what they are. Whatever they are, they don't know how to build forts. I also had to end that war faster than I originally planned because political debates broke out inside my empire once again. This newly conquered hold has 2 incredible advantages: huge mithril deposits, and a monument that will massively improve my army in the future. Besides that, yet another hold that needs restoring. After these conquests, I've become powerful enough to upgrade my rank to a kingdom. And honestly, while I'm at it, once my armies recover, I immediately attack the pink dwarves, because I want to turn them into my vassal. The war is quick and easy, so I have no trouble securing my very first vassal. And as a reward for my success, a clan revolt breaks out, giving me a chance to replace my ruler with a genuinely excellent one. But my current rulers are even better. Oh no, the revolt happens across every single hold. I even have to hire mercenaries temporarily just to break through those armies. Then, after progressing further through my missions, it turns out I'm incredibly unlucky. I need 2 manufactories in my capital. And yes, 1 manufactory is already under construction thanks to the previous mission, but it'll take another 52 months to finish. Unfortunately, the Age of Monsters ends in just 24 months. That feels pretty early, if you ask me. Just my luck. Well, now that I know I won't be able to keep the price of gems at 5 gold, I can move on to the next stage of the campaign, where I'll focus on building a strong economy anyway and preparing for the collapse. Although I can't fully focus on building up my economy just yet, because at this point I have to be extremely careful. The moment I exceed 150 gold income, a hidden crisis will trigger. Since the first age is also coming to an end, I activate tax edicts everywhere. Yes, the ones I completely forgot about. I also loot every single one of my provinces as a one-time boost, because every tax modifier also increases the amount of money I receive from that action. I'll also make use of the spare time I have by sending armies to every location where an expedition is available. I assign 10,000 soldiers to each one, maximize their morale mostly by spending money, since I have plenty of it, and make sure they have maximum supplies as well. From what I can tell, this is going to be a fairly dangerous expedition of medium length, although I don't really understand what exactly this loot value represents. And then I launch the expedition. Oh, unfortunately, you can only have 1 expedition active at a time. I'm also holding back on using magic, especially the spell that increases income from my mineral resources. Instead, I unlock the upgrade for my first spell, which generates even more monarch points, and I invest all of my mana into that. Meanwhile, apparently some new gods have been discovered over there, or maybe they were all killed. I don't really understand these human affairs. It won't shake my faith. And all of this happens before the Age of Discovery has even begun, so unfortunately this mission will only reward me with money. Actually, there's still a chance that this event won't fire. My gems are still worth 5 gold, so keep your fingers crossed that the manufactory finishes quickly. Well, unfortunately, I can see you weren't crossing your fingers, because my gems are no longer expensive, but I was so close. Still, my income only dropped by about 5 gold, well actually 8. Even so, I continued taking steps to weaken the Diamond Cutters Guild. And thanks to one of the earlier missions where I basically won them over, I can now seize their property much more cheaply. Excellent, more money. Alright then, time to complete these 2 gem-related missions. I've got an embarrassment of riches. Meanwhile, my army has finally reached the dungeon boss, some kind of metal golem. Shortly afterward, the expedition returned, or rather, only 1/10 of its members made it back. But the important thing is that they brought loot with them. Even better, this expedition returned with the crown jewels. By the way, I've already tested this. If I had sent mercenaries on that expedition instead, I would have gotten the manpower back into my pool afterward. Beautiful, I've almost completely eliminated roughness. I absolutely love Dwarven politics. After restoring Verkal, I also repaired the gate that once guarded the entrance to the Dwarven tunnels. A magical gate, which rewards me with claims that I don't actually need. Still, I'll continue pushing toward Arg Ordstun. That now allows me to secure even more locations guarding the entrances to the holds. But what's even more important to me is finishing the conquest of my section of the Serpent Spine. True to goblin fortifications, these weren't much of a challenge. The only issue was that this goblin tribe had expanded a little too much, so in the end I decided to conquer only the tunnels and the hold itself. And with the capture of the final hold in this region, Serpent's Spire, I finally managed to remove the hardliners from the government. We've overcome the chaos and reformed our glorious Dwarven Council, which has a very positive impact on the kingdom. Now I start generating points in the opposite direction and I can spend them on one of these three actions. The glory of the Dwarven kingdom has been restored. Now all that's left is to reclaim our former hegemony. However, a crisis stands in the way. The Horde Curse. Because I'm simply too rich, and I wasn't even building manufactories during that time. Instead, I've filled my realm with manpower buildings, force limit buildings, and mage towers. Thanks to that, I can feed nearly 100,000 soldiers. I am also completely up to date in technology, and my innovativeness is sitting at almost 60. So I think my kingdom is ready for the coming crisis, and I'll be able to deal with all of its penalties by reforming the kingdom and reclaiming our hegemony, and then by building an empire, which is exactly what I'll cover in the next episode. It should be out in a week or two, and if it isn't, I recommend checking out my Byzantium playthrough instead, where I focus on development while taking full advantage of that empire's unique mechanics.